Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, the number of Muslims in British prisons has gone up 200% since 9/11. Now, some inmates say that they are being bullied into conversion by Islamic prison gangs. We look into this claim and the rising number of British Muslim prisoners.
There has been a particular concern about radicalisation in prisons, which has affected prison policy and the way prisons respond to Muslims. This has created a stigma in prison around Islam. Muslim male prisoners we spoke to felt the effect of this. They felt as though they were seen by staff and non-Muslim prisoners through the lens of terrorism and extremism, and that everything they did was treated with suspicion. As one person we interviewed said,
"Sometimes it feels like your religion and your skin colour doesn't help you in prison."
This reinforces previous research which has found tensions relating to fears of extremism and radicalisation. Faith enabled the Muslim men and women we spoke to construct a positive identity in prison, providing motivation and focus. There is growing evidence which shows that Muslim prisoners have become the new security threat group and subject to increasing scrutiny by security departments. This creates an immediate tension between the journey Muslims go through in prison and the way the prison system responds to this process. We found that many Muslims become more religious during their time in prison because of the support it provides them. But the prison system sees this as a risk to be managed and even prevented.
When you have a lot of time to reflect, you think about, what have I done? How can I make it better? How can I make myself better? And you tend to look for answers. The way you look for answers is asking God questions, asking God for forgiveness, asking God to make wiser choices, and then to look for specific answers. A lot of people turn to the Quran, and it gives you a lot of peace.
This positive response to Islam sits in contrast to prison policies which encourage staff to look out for signs of radicalisation. A 2016 review of Islamist extremism in the criminal justice system by the Ministry of Justice found it to be a growing problem within prisons, requiring a comprehensive and coordinated strategy to monitor and counter it. To identify the threat, the review provides a list of ways that Islamist extremism can manifest itself, including unsupervised collective worship, attempts to prevent staff searches by claiming dress as religious, Muslim gang culture, and exploiting staff fear of being labelled racist. Previous research found evidence that prison staff had come to perceive Islam as a radical religion and would sometimes view any outward appearance of Islam as evidence of radicalisation, writing this evidence up in their security reports. The experience of Muslims that we spoke to for our Muslims in Prisons project reinforced this finding. Unsupervised collective worship, for example, is considered a potential sign of radicalisation, and many of the Muslim male prisoners talked about how staff and other prisoners would react negatively to Muslims praying in groups together, whether that was in each other's cells or praying aloud. Communal worship and praying in congregation is not an unusual practice in any religion, and yet it is considered as a sign of extremism and radicalisation when it comes to Muslims and Islam. For example, if Muslims in prison were in a group together on the wings, they were perceived as a gang. Staff would interrupt and split groups apart if they saw Muslims spending time together more than non-Muslim groups. It felt to the Muslim prisoners that they were purposely put on different wings to separate them. Visible markers of Muslim identity was also treated with suspicion. If Muslims grew a beard or dressed differently, even outside of the prison, this could also be met with suspicion. Appearing more visibly Muslim makes them seem a greater risk and more vulnerable to discrimination. This sentiment runs throughout the criminal justice system. Some spoke about feeling like they needed to alter their behaviour and change their appearance to seem less Muslim, particularly during their trial, in the hope that the court would be more lenient. One former prisoner said,
"These things are normal, but to them, they see it as extreme. The officers might think, oh, these guys are getting radicalized. How come one day he's normal, now he's got a beard? Look, he's praying now. One day he's a gangster, now he's preaching. So he's got that closest to God, but they're thinking people are radicalizing him. He might even start getting investigated.
This tension between prison policy, which regards some practice as extreme, but which Muslim prisoners would regard as normal, will be relevant to the voluntary sector to determine how best to deliver their service. For instance, one of the indicators of radicalization is Muslim gang culture. But as a staff member at the Prison Advice and Care Trust questioned,
why are they called gangs? They are just people who share the same traits, dress the same, have the same religion. It does not make them a gang. It's absolutely natural that the people who share the same interests or beliefs would want to be with each other.
They went on to describe how the lack of cultural and religious understanding in prison reinforced the notion of Muslim gangs when Muslims are in a group. Not knowing the religious and cultural practices, traditions and dress means that they are easily interpreted as gang signs, like turning up their trouser legs or wearing religious hats on a particular day. Within the prison estate, there is a lack of transparency around how Prevent operates. We are not able to tell how many individuals were referred under Prevent when in prison, whether those referrals resulted in any further action, and what the outcomes for those individuals were. Nor is there any transparency on the training that prison staff receive on Prevent and extremism, the interventions provided to those referred, or actions taken against them as the result of radicalization concerns. The lack of transparency and accountability for Prevent in prisons is a major concern for the treatment and outcomes of Muslims in prison.
Friday afternoon, and prayers are observed among those who pursued a criminal